All right, folks, how we doing? Today is the 4th of August, and this is episode number 4 of WarTrackerTV. I'm your host, Matt. The purpose of WarTrackerTV is to bring awareness to any and all conflicts and wars happening across the globe. We'll learn about different peoples, different countries, different governments, religions, and any other factors contributed to these events. I'm an expert in nothing and merely here to help you facilitate the learning of these topics. All the news articles, documents, and Google Earth projects will be made available after the broadcast on my X profile at x.com/WarTrackerTV. And then YouTube will serve as the permanent platform for all previous episodes. All right. All right. Already got some bots in the chat. Mr. Logan, how you doing, brother? Hope you're well. We're going to go straight to Gaza here today. So last week, the story more or less was the images of all the Palestinian children that were starting to finally leak out of Gaza. Obviously, starvation's become a problem. It's pretty evident within the photographs. But over the weekend, there were some new videos that came out and some pictures and stuff of some of the hostages. So Hamas still has, I think, a couple dozen hostages, of which the Israelis believe about half of them are still alive. There we go. Videos of emaciated Israeli hostages in Gaza increase pressure on Netanyahu for a ceasefire. MG, how you doing, brother? So this came out this morning. New images of emaciated Israeli hostages held in Gaza have horrified Israelis and added pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu to reach a ceasefire with Hamas, even as his government considers another expansion of the nearly 22-month war. And we'll get into this a little more here soon. The videos released late last week by militant groups Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad show two skeletal hostages pleading for their lives. In one, Aviator David says he is digging his own grave and speaks of days without food, and the other, Ram Brezolovsky, writhes in agony on a dirty mattress and says injuries in his foot prevent him from being able to stand. The Associated Press does not normally publish videos of hostages filmed under duress, but is publishing brief excerpts after receiving consent from the families. So the families of these hostages have more or less asked the Associated Press to put this out there, which usually the AP will not do. Is promoting pictures of hostages sometimes can kind of play into the hands of the people that are making the videos, but in this instance, because of the fact that these guys have been held hostage, I think for some 600 days now, they're kind of breaking from the norm, so to speak, at the Associated Press. The videos led tens of thousands of Israelis to take to the streets on Saturday night and demand a ceasefire deal in one of the largest turnouts for the weekly protests in recent months. So with the release of these videos over the weekend, led to huge amounts of protests, the largest that they've seen since the October 7th kind of beginning of this war, which, of course, that was almost 2 years ago now. In this new video, his eyes are extinguished. He is helpless, and so am I. One of the mothers said, there's a little photo there of one of the guys. I don't think we're going to watch the videos. They're tough. It's, starving. These are, I think a couple of them were soldiers that were taken hostage on October 7th. I think a couple of them are just, random people that were taken hostage. The videos were released as warnings about famine among Palestinians are growing in Gaza. Images of starving Palestinians have drawn international condemnation of Israeli policies limiting aid deliveries into the country. Families of the hostages fear that lack of food threatens the remaining hostages, too. Fewer than half of the 50 hostages are believed to be alive. So there's your numbers right there. So there might be about 24 or so of these guys left. And remember when Hamas originally took these hostages, I think it was 250 or 260 total, something around there. Netanyahu said he was shocked by the images of the two hostages and met with the Red Cross to ask that it bring hostages food and medicine, access that the organization says it has never been granted by Hamas. So Netanyahu's asking the Red Cross for help, and the Red Cross is like, yeah, we can't do anything for you, bud. Sorry. When I see these, I understand exactly what Hamas wants. Netanyahu said they do not want a deal. They want to break us using these videos of horror. All right. So that is the Israeli Prime Minister's view on the release of those videos. He said the videos renewed his determination to release the hostages and eliminate Hamas. He added that the militant group is starving the hostages like the Nazis starved the Jews. The International Committee of the Red Cross said it was appalled by the harrowing videos and called for access to the hostages. Hamas's military wing said it was ready to respond positively to Red Cross requests to deliver food to hostages if humanitarian corridors for aid deliveries are open in a regular and permanent manner in Gaza. So Hamas is saying they'll allow Red Cross in if corridors for aid deliveries for the Palestinians are permanently opened. It also asserted that the hostages eat the same food as their fighters and the general public and denied any intentional starvation. Israel's mission to the UN has said it requested emergency meeting of the UN Security Council on the hostages, which will take place tomorrow on Tuesday. Israel's foreign minister said he will travel to New York for the meeting, so that's going to be in New York City on Tuesday. The videos were being used by Hamas to force upon us their conditions on remaining in power. Well, there you have it. Oh, okay. I got you, MG. Yeah, I left some auto mod stuff on just in case, just in case. All right. So more starvation deaths. Videos of the hostages emerged as experts warn that Gaza faces a worst case scenario. So we kind of touched up on this last week. No aid entered Gaza between March 2nd and May 19th. That's 2.5 months with no aid. And then since then, aid has been limited. The United Nations says 850 people have been killed. Now, I know the Hamas run number is something like 1,300. So the UN apparently is able to verify about 2/3 of the deaths that that Hamas is claiming as far as people that were seeking aid. Gaza's health ministry said Monday that 5 more Palestinian adults died of malnutrition. A total of 87 adults have died of malnutrition since the ministry started counting such deaths at the end of June. So they really only started counting, hunger-related deaths for about the last month and a half, not quite. 93 children have died of malnutrition-related causes since the war in Gaza began, the ministry said. I'm surprised it's not more, honestly. They got no aid between March 2nd and May 19th. And they're only aware of 93 children dying of starvation. Israel's government has denied that people are starving to death in Gaza. All right, yeah. So there's that one. Now we're going to look at some of the European reactions to those videos that came out on the hostages. So here's just a couple stills from 2 of those hostages. I believe these are the 2 ex-soldiers that have been captured. European nations slam videos of emaciated hostages, calling Hamas to disarm. The German leader urges Israel not to respond to Hamas's cynicism by halting aid deliveries to Gaza after release. Yeah, so don't respond by halting aid is what they're saying, is what the Germans are saying. The European Union, Britain, France, and Germany on Sunday condemned propaganda videos of 2 emaciated Israeli hostages published by Gaza terror groups last week, with the leaders insisting Hamas disarm and play no role in the future of the Strip. So that's the big issue, is just the existence of Hamas in Gaza. It seems Israel's completely unaccepting, and Europe seems pretty on board. I know we're going to read about the American view here in a second, at least the American government view. So we got Rom and Aviator appeared pale and emaciated in footage released by the Palestinians, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, that's terrorist group, and Hamas. Clips from which the captive's family have approved for publication. In a clip approved for publication on Saturday, David could be seen in an underground tunnel digging what he said he feared was his own grave. French President Macron said the release of the videos showed the captors' inhumanity without bounds and abject cruelty. The absolute priority for France is the immediate release of all hostages. We must have the total demilitarization of Hamas, its complete exclusion from any form of governance, and the recognition of Israel by the state of Palestine, said Macron. He's also vowed to recognize Palestine. So Macron's kind of playing both sides of the aisle here. He wants a complete destruction of Hamas, but he also has said in September, France is going to recognize the state of Palestine. And I think France was the first major European country to come out and say they will recognize a Palestinian state. Now, I assume the delay is maybe he's hoping by the end of the summer that Hamas is defeated, perhaps. Because basically what this paragraph says is that they want to recognize the Palestinian state, but they're not going to recognize them if Hamas has any inclusion whatsoever, is what I'm getting from this slightly confusing paragraph here. Anyways, he promised to work without respite for the reestablishment without delay of a ceasefire and to allow the mass delivery of humanitarian aid still blocked at the gates of Gaza. German Chancellor Merz said in an interview with Germany's Bild newspaper that the videos show that Hamas should no longer play a role in the future of Gaza. He also called on Israel not to respond to Hamas's cynicism by halting the aid. So the German chancellor is saying, full force on aid. Do not allow these videos to pause that. While simultaneously condemning the videos. UN-mandated experts have warned of unfolding famine in the besieged territory, while Israel has denied reports of widespread starvation and accused Hamas of hijacking aid deliveries. So again, back in May, they started this whole Gaza Humanitarian Foundation in an effort to distribute aid without that aid being hijacked by Hamas. It's not only Hamas, too. There's people who are just taking the aid and then selling it to the people who need it. This is kind of, unfortunately, in situations like this, you always find a black market existing where the strong kind of prey on the weak. And so that's happening internally in the lands of Gaza here. The UK Foreign Secretary Lammy said the images of hostages being paraded for propaganda are sickening. Every hostage must be released unconditionally. Hamas must disarm and have no control. So, the whole point, I think, of Hamas was they were going to show these videos and see. It'd be like, look, it seems like what they're saying is you're starving the Palestinian people. Well, here's what's happening to your hostages. But it also seems like that the reaction they're looking for is not being mustered here. Europe as a whole pretty much seems to be condemning this. The EU's top diplomat, Kallas, also condemned the videos as showing Hamas's barbarity, demanding the terror group disarm and release remaining hostages. Ukraine's foreign minister, Sybiga, added his voice to the outrage, saying that Hamas's inhumane treatment of the Israeli hostages deserves a very strong condemnation. So even Ukraine is taking a moment to step away from their own problems and say, hey, that's a little bit excessive, which, we've heard the stories coming out of Ukraine of Russia executing war prisoners and civilians and stuff. So for them to even look away from that and say something about this, it does say something. People in Gaza should not remain suffering because of Hamas's heinous crimes. It must lay down its arms and release all hostages immediately. So we keep kind of going back and forth here. People condemning the Israelis, and then those same people turn around, they condemn Hamas. Depending on what happens next, they'll probably be condemning the Israelis again. So let's see what Hamas has to say about this. Obviously, you know, it's kind of like getting news from the Russian government. You take it with a grain of salt. Hamas says it will allow aid for hostages if Israel halts airstrikes and opens permanent humanitarian corridors. This is just a quick summary article because I don't have the subscription to Reuters. Israel says 4 UN fuel trucks bring fuel to help run hospitals, bakeries, and other key services. Gaza gravely short on fuel and food since Israel curbed deliveries months ago. That was back in March. 6 more Palestinians have died of starvation in the last 24 hours. Israeli fires kills at least 80 people in Gaza on Sunday, while some were trying to reach aid hubs. Hamas said on Sunday it was prepared to coordinate with the Red Cross to deliver aid to hostages it holds in Gaza if Israel meets certain conditions, after a video it released showing an emaciated captive drew sharp criticism from the Western powers. So I think what Hamas was hoping for in the reaction to that video was not achieved, it seems. Hamas said any coordination with the Red Cross is contingent upon Israel permanently opening humanitarian corridors and halting airstrikes during the distribution of aid. Yeah, and actually, MG, we're going to talk about Africa at the end of this program because there is something very similar to what's happening in Gaza is happening in a city in Africa right now. Now, I was completely oblivious to this until today. Do they carry Hamas ID cards? Yeah, who is Hamas and who isn't exactly? And that's always been the problem in the Middle East is identifying who combatants are and who non-combatants are. And I saw a video on X today. You know, it's obviously you can't make opinions based on one video you see on X, but basically it was presumably a Hamas fighter in a tent, presumably in a refugee camp, launching mortars out of a tube. Now, is that what's really happening? You know, they could stage that video very easily. I know when I was in Iraq, one of the common tactics they would use was they would have mortar tubes on the back of pickup trucks. I know they're not doing this in Gaza. I don't think they have the means to do this right now, but they would have mortar tubes on the back of pickup trucks. They would drive to, you know, a populated area or a hospital or right outside a school or something. They'd shoot a couple rounds and then they'd drive off, you know, trying to bait out those retaliatory attacks. And I don't think it took very long before the United States figured that out. But in Gaza, you know, it's one of the biggest problems with Gaza is the population density is extreme there. Density of Gaza. And so when you have an extremely dense population and some of that population are terrorists, it is an extremely difficult situation. As an estimated population of approximately 2.1 to 2.3 million people living in 360 square kilometers. That is astounding. This translates to a population density of around 5,500 people per square kilometer or 14,000 people per square mile. So it's comparable to the population density of London, which London is a very dense city. It is the most densely in its most densely populated areas, like parts of Gaza City or refugee camps, the density can be slightly higher, reaching levels comparable to cities in highly populated parts of Asia. So they're probably talking about like Shanghai and Hong Kong and cities like that have, you know, 10 plus million people, tons and tons of skyscrapers. You know, when you can build vertically, that population density doesn't mean so much, but you can't build vertically in Gaza because the entire land is essentially destroyed at this point. All right. Now we've got U.S. and Israeli officials. What do they have to say in response? Let's see. Let's zoom in here a little bit. U.S. and Israeli officials float the idea of all or nothing Gaza deal. So again, you got two sides kind of unwilling to budge on any sort of negotiations. The apparent shift in tone comes as ceasefire negotiations have hit a wall and pressure is mounting on Israel over the hunger crisis in Gaza. So there's pressure mounting on Israel because of the suffering of the civilian population of Palestine. And then there's pressure mounting on Hamas because of these videos they just released of some of these, 24 or so. There's only a couple dozen hostages left that they believe are still living. They said something around 24 still might be alive out of 50. All right. For months, the Israeli government had focused on negotiating a two-phase deal for a 60-day ceasefire in Gaza and the release of some hostages, leaving discussions about a permanent end to the war for a later stage. So they wanted a temporary thing that could kind of be the catalyst for more permanent talks, it seems. With the talks now at an impasse, American and Israeli officials appear to be sharply changing their tone by signaling that they will push for a comprehensive deal. But Israel and Hamas remain far apart, and analysts said this new approach could also face steep challenges. So the more rigid you get in your negotiations, the less likely you're going to get negotiations. That is kind of just a unwritten law of negotiations. The shift, at least in rhetoric, comes as the Israeli government faces rising domestic pressure to secure the release of hostages still held in Gaza. Israel believes that about 20 are still alive and that the bodies of around 30 others remain in the enclave. So there's 50 total. They think 20 are alive. Videos released over the weekend showed two living captives looking emaciated and frail, shocking many Israelis and sparking fear among the hostages' families. The Israeli government has also come under mounting international criticism over the mass hunger that has spread through Gaza's population of about 2 million people after Israel imposed those strict restrictions in the recent months. Israel has continued launching military strikes on Gaza, even as it has facilitated the entry of more aid into Gaza in recent days. The Palestine Red Crescent Society said on Sunday that Israeli artillery, and so this is kind of a big story too that happened over the weekend. The Palestinian Red Crescent Society, which is an aid organization, I assume they have some sort of connection with the Red Cross. But on Sunday, Israeli artillery hit its offices in Khan Yunis, killing one of the group's staffers and injuring multiple others. It also kind of destroyed their facility. And the Israeli military has still been silent about that one. They haven't come out and said that they didn't do that yet or that they weren't responsible. So people are kind of waiting to see what they're going to say about that, because obviously, when you're dropping artillery, you should never be dropping artillery in urban areas. But when you are, artillery is inherently inaccurate. Even GPS guided artillery is only accurate within 10 meters, which, 10 meters off for an artillery shell, you're probably still going to destroy your target, right? Now, presumably, the Israelis weren't intentionally trying to hit the Palestine Red Crescent Society, but they haven't said anything about it yet. So that makes you kind of wonder, was this purely just an accident? They're trying to figure out what to say. Did they think it was something else that they were bombing? What's their side of the story on this? We don't know. But yet another incident of Israeli fire killing innocent people. Steve Witkoff, the Trump administration's special envoy to the Middle East, who is visiting the region, met with families of Israeli hostages on Saturday and told them that President Trump now wants to see all living hostages released at once. No piecemeal deals. That doesn't work, he said, according to an audio recording of part of a meeting. Now we think that we have to shift this negotiation to all or nothing. Everybody comes home, he said. We have a plan around it. All right, he said, without elaborating. So Steve Witkoff, he's kind of the special envoy to the Middle East, I believe. I think I follow him on X too, if I remember right. Anyways, he's saying the U.S. no longer thinks a ceasefire is going to happen. Basically, now he's saying it's all or nothing, which more or less means that he's going to he basically needs a complete surrender by Hamas is essentially, and then letting all the hostages out. It's that or nothing, I guess, is what he's saying. Israel and Hamas do not negotiate directly. Instead, negotiations for a ceasefire between the two sides have run through intermediaries, either the United States, Qatar, and or Egypt. Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel and President Trump are said to be working on a new proposal that would involve presenting Hamas with an ultimatum, according to reports in the Israeli news. I wonder what that would be at this point. What would the ultimatum be? Under the terms of the ultimatum, Hamas would have to release the remaining hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners and agree to terms to end the war that include the group's disarmament. Otherwise, the Israeli military would continue its campaign. So this paragraph right here tells me this is probably not going to be over anytime soon, because I don't think Hamas is going to lay down their arms. I mean, if they were going to do that, you think they probably would have already, right? It seems like they're just going to fight it out to the bitter end. Remember, they're funded by Iran, so Iran, it is a pretty large country, and they do, their economy is not great. I just read an article the other day about inflation, but they are very dedicated to fighting the Israelis. Now, I'm thinking, because there was that 12-day Israel-Iran war, and I think what, Israel was kind of hoping maybe they were cutting the head off the snake there, and that Hamas's footprint would be diminished greatly in Gaza if they, followed through with all those attacks back in June. However, it doesn't seem like that pressure has resulted in what they wanted. So you got Hamas releasing videos hoping for an outcome that didn't happen. You got Israel doing all the things they've been doing, hoping for an outcome that still hasn't happened. And both sides seem pretty rigid in their demands. Mardawi, a Hamas official, said the Palestinian armed group had yet to receive a formal Israeli proposal for a comprehensive deal. He said that while Hamas supported such an agreement in principle, it would not disarm, which has long been a core Israeli condition. So, like I just said, Hamas, they're not just going to give up and go away. And this war has been going on for decades, too, between Hamas and Israel. This has been our demand. It's been kind of a stagnant, quiet war, but it's been going on. Obviously, it's been much more at the forefront since October 7th, 2023. This has been our demand from the beginning and into the war, the release of prisoners, and day after arrangements in the Gaza Strip, a clear and comprehensive deal, Mr. Mardawi said in a phone interview. The prospects of any rapid advancement towards such a deal appear dim. Hamas has consistently rejected Israel's terms for ending the war throughout the negotiations. On Saturday, the group said in a statement that it would not disarm unless a Palestinian state was established, despite a call from Arab State last week for the group to do so. The Israeli government opposes Palestinian statehood. On Sunday, the Israeli National Security Minister visited the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, which Jews revere as the Temple Mount, long a tinderbox for Israeli-Palestinian tensions. Arab leaders denounced his ascent to the site, during which he openly prayed a provocation. So now you have a member of the National Security Minister for Israel kind of provoking Muslims by praying at a mosque, which Jews call the Temple Mount. So again, Judaism is about, I think it predates Islam by about 1,500 or so years. So it is very possible, especially in the Holy Land, that there are areas now known as, Islam worship places that were once maybe Christian worship places or Jewish worship places. So the Jews call this place the Temple Mount, but Muslims call it the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So There's another point of contention to fight over. It's important to convey from this place that we should immediately conquer Gaza, exercise our sovereignty there, and eliminate every last Hamas member. And that is what this national security minister said from the site, nonetheless, after he prayed there. Yeah. That's the crazy part, MG, is like, you would think they could negotiate without continuing to drop bombs on buildings and people and stuff. But I don't know. This is one of the most complicated things going on in the world. And, these are obviously you could say it stems back much further than the 40s, but really the 40s, when the introduction of the state of Israel came, those lands, people were living there prior to this, and it was always going to be a problem, right? This was always going to happen eventually, inevitably. It's kind of, it's really, it is predictable to a point. Now, what's going to happen next? Is Gaza going to be recognized as a state? Or not Gaza, but Palestine as a whole. And I don't know what that looks like. I guess it would include Gaza and the West Bank, maybe. Which, of course, are separated on land. We've looked at this before, but this is Gaza, the Gaza Strip, and then this is the West Bank. So presumably Palestine would look something like that strip and that strip of land. Presumably. But, that's when you come and you recognize a new country, a new state, as they're calling it. Part of that recognition is you have to establish what the borders are. And that's going to be a very contentious point of debate here. Because Israel, it's pretty well documented. They've been slowly kind of pushing into the West Bank, building more and more settlements over the years. So, that's going to be very difficult. Where does the international community draw the line? Many Israelis say they support a comprehensive deal to return all the hostages and end the war. Well, you would assume so, right? But many are skeptical that such a deal can be achieved under the conditions set by the hardline Israeli government. Okay, so the Israeli population, they want an end to the war. They want their hostages back. Pretty basic. It's easy to assume that they would want that. But they don't think it's going to happen with some of the demands that their own government is making. So that's a very interesting point right there. And of course, the government has vowed to continue fighting until Hamas surrenders or is completely destroyed. Many also doubt that Hamas would ultimately give up all the hostages, the only cards the group holds against Israel. Race, ethnicity, or religion. Yeah, let's see real quick. Oh, yeah, it doesn't even show me here. That's weird. Probably got to get to the mod settings. I don't have the modding part down right now. It's hard to solo mod 3 different streams at the same time while I'm reading, but we'll get that down one of these days. All right. Netanyahu argued on Sunday night that Hamas does not want a deal and vowed to press on the attempt to release our captive sons, eliminate Hamas, and ensure that Gaza no longer poses a threat. So Netanyahu's, if only one thing, at least he's consistent, right? You kind of always get the same answer from him. All right. So that kind of leaves us with where we're at in Gaza for the moment. Yeah, it wasn't you this time. It was you, Logan. Huh. It's weird because it shows that comment, unless it was a different one that it just deleted and first offense impossible. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, Logan, is who started it. Especially, we could talk about the Israelis and the Palestinians, or the Israelis and the Israelis and the Muslims. But ultimately, are we talking about who started it in the 60s? Are we talking about who started it in the 40s? Are we talking about who started it 1,500 years ago? Like, when is the beginning? So that's the crazy part about all this is so much of it just dates back so long. Jews and Muslims, they have a rocky history. There's been times where they've been peaceful, times where they haven't been. But pretty much since the establishment of the state of Israel, I think there was some peace for a little while with the former Iranian regime that used to exist before they were overthrown and new leaders were installed, and then I think there was somewhat of a civil war. And now you've got the regime that you have. So it's been a long time coming. This whole thing about the charter of Hamas. Yeah, exactly. It's and I don't want to spend too much time giving a microphone to Hamas because obviously they are Hamas. They're a terrorist organization at the end of the day. But it is important because with what's going on, if there's ever going to be a ceasefire, these two sides have to come together. And Hamas is running Palestine. They run the government, they run the health ministry, they run pretty much everything. So there's a certain element of having to recognize Hamas to progress talks or anything of that sort. You know what I mean? So it's crazy topic, but we're going to see what happens over this week. Really, I would assume, the United States and Israel is kind of coming up with their exact terms of what this ceasefire deal or the end to this war is going to look like. We can pretty much assume Hamas is going to reject it, but we'll be talking about that soon enough. All right, on to Ukraine. So over the weekend and the end of last week, we had a lot of strikes in Ukraine by the Russians. They're getting more and more indiscriminate, we'll say. The search efforts conclude. Russia's attack on Kyiv becomes the most deadly on capital this year, and this was a couple days ago on the 31st. So 31 civilians were killed. I think this was overnight Thursday or Friday. Russia launched a barrage of drones and missiles on Kyiv on July 31st, killing at least 31 people and injuring 179, and one of the deadliest attacks on the capital since the start of the full-scale invasion. So now we've got these strikes from the Russians are ramping up as the August 8th deadline approaches that has been arbitrarily set by the Trump administration. So we're going to see, this will be another interesting week for this conflict as well. Chichenko, head of the city's military administration, said that as of the morning of August 1st, the Russian attack had killed 31. At around 10:40 local time, rescuers recovered 3 more bodies. Later in the day, President Zelensky visited the site of the attack, laying flowers amid the rubble. There is no way to justify what Russia is doing. We will never forgive the killing of our people, these brutal strikes. Zelensky said the president also announced that a total number of injured victims had reached that 179 mark. Among the victims was senior police lieutenant, a patrol officer who had served on Kyiv's police force since 2017. Her body was recovered from the rubble in a district during operations. 3 police officers and 12 children were among the injured. 30 people, including 5 children, were hospitalized on the 31st. First responders have been working at the scenes of those attacks. Klitschko added that the number of children injured was the highest recorded in the city since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. The deadliest attack on the capital occurred in December 2023 when an additional 2 people. So this is very close to being the deadliest attack on Kyiv since the beginning of the war. We got some photos here of some of the destruction. Let me just zoom in a little bit so we can see these better. But you've got, obviously every time these bombs drop, you've got these people, these recovery first responders who go in. I mean, these people are absolute heroes because obviously when bombs are dropping and buildings are destroyed and it just happened, there's always the fear that a next wave is going to come. But these guys, they go out and they brave that in hopes of, helping anyone who might be trapped in this rubble. It's about the most honorable work you could possibly think of. I mean, look, like, where do you even begin trying to find people in destroyed rubble like this? Like, it's very difficult. I mean, and you can see this is an extremely dangerous job. These guys are up 1, 2, 3 stories, completely exposed. And then you've got whatever, chemicals and stuff burning out of the smoke, probably asbestos and stuff like that. I know a lot of the 9/11 first responders got terrible, instances of lung cancer and different stuff like that from their time trying to, do recovery. And you got to think a lot of these first responders, since this war has been going on for 3+ years now, you got to think a lot of these guys are going to have health problems when this is all said and done. Russian forces launched over 300 drones and 8 missiles into Ukraine overnight, targeting Kyiv and other regions. In response to the attack, August 1st has been declared a day of mourning in Kyiv. So they had a couple days ago a day of mourning. Flags were flown at half-mast. That's interesting. You would think the flags would be at half-mast for the whole war. It's completely insignificant side note here, but I would think they'd be flown at half-mast the whole time as the active engagement's going. But nonetheless, we move on. All entertainment events are banned. It seems like they're trying to, carry on with life. Those who have stayed, at least. The attack came shortly after President Trump threatened to impose new tariffs on Russia. So again, President Trump, first he came out with the 50-day thing. Russia had a bunch of drone attacks after that. So then he came out with this 10-day thing. And then this was Russia's response, was the second worst attack on Kyiv in 3+ years, 3.5 now. Kyiv is under massive drone attack. Make no mistake. This is Putin's response to Trump's deadline. Yep. He's testing American resolve and strength. We must not be found wanting. So, kind of similar to the Israel-Hamas war. Now you've got two parties making demands, both of which are, pretty rigid and unwilling to budge. At least 27 locations around the city were hit. All right. So we're going to go ahead and plot this. We'll find Kyiv. Throw our first plot of the week down here. 31 civilians killed in drone/missile strikes. All right. And that was 31 July. I missed the end of last week because I was dog sitting. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get a stream off, but we're kind of catching up here on things that happened at the end of last week and over the weekend. All right. So there's one article on Ukraine. Here is presumably a response to the Kyiv attacks. However, this could have been completely planned. Anyways, 11 explosions recorded. Ukrainian drones strike key Russian radio plant in Penza. So one of the things Ukraine has been able to do recent times in the war is do some sabotage type attacks into the Russian homeland. And this is one of them. The Secret Service of Ukraine drones struck a Russian radio electronics plant in the western city of Penza that manufactures military-grade equipment, a source in the agency told the Kyiv Independent on July 31st. So this actually might have been happening right about the same time as those attacks on Kyiv. So they're probably, unrelated. However, obviously, it's all the same war. Real quick, Penza. Let's find Penza. Mark that down. Pinza, Russia. They said it's out west somewhere. Okay. So there you have it. Now, where's Moscow? Moscow is probably. Oh, okay. So it's actually further east than Moscow. All right. Interesting. Now, the Ukrainians have been able to strike very, very deep in Russian territory multiple times throughout this war. So the further, of course, the further away it is from Ukraine, the more impressive it is. But also, I mean, they were hitting a bomber factory that was way the hell out down here somewhere. So they've been very successful in attacking behind enemy lines here in Ukraine. So this is drone attacks on radio manufacturers. And that is also 31 July. Cool. All right. At least 11 explosions were recorded following a large-scale fire at the Radio Zavod plant, a sanctioned facility owned by the Russian state-owned Rostec Defense Corporation. The statement comes after Russian officials and media reported mass Ukrainian strikes across multiple regions overnight on the 31st, including against an industrial facility in Penza and energy infrastructure in Volgograd Oblast. Kovalenko, head of Ukraine's Center for Countering Disinformation, said that the Radio Zavod plant specializes in equipment for mobile command units, automated combat control systems, and military-grade radio stations. It is a key enterprise of the Russian military-industrial complex. Here's the video. So this is presumably from a Russian civilian up in an apartment complex. You can hear a baby in the background. Interesting. So the Russians, they're manufacturing, war equipment right there. And this, of course, this is next to civilian areas. So the Ukrainians really have to be careful with their strikes, not to kill any civilians, because that will instantly be used against them. Propaganda by the old Russian war ministry there. Yeah, I know, Logan. It's crazy. I thought if the first 100 threats didn't get them, the 101st surely would. But here we are, nonetheless. I think Putin pretty much. I don't think Putin cares what Trump says. It seems it's amazing how far we've come in the last 8 years. The U.S.-Russian relations. We went from years of Russia got Trump elected to now it's Russia doesn't care what Trump says. They're going to go on their war anyways. So it's kind of a weird, wild situation. But anyways, all politics aside, according to the SBU source, the automated combat systems produced at the facility are used across multiple Russian military branches, from air defense to artillery. Preliminary reports indicate that the plant's new production facility and warehouses with components were hit. Without disclosing the nature of the facility, Penza Oblast governor confirmed the attack, saying that a fire had occurred. There is a fire at the plant which is being extinguished. So that's what the governor had to say about it. That's typical Russian response there. They're not going to give any credit to the Ukrainians for carrying that attack out. Two pro-government Russian Telegram channels, Shot and Baza, posted footage of the fire and reported widespread mobile service disruptions. All right. I think that pretty much covers that. Russia's defense ministry claimed that air defenses shot down 31 drones over 6 regions, including 11 over Volgograd. So not all their drones are making it to their targets, if you believe the Russian story, but they're still able to destroy some of these war manufacturing facilities. All right, let's see. Here we go. The big story. Now, this, of course, is from the 31st, but Trump sets August 8th as the official deadline for this peace deal. So this, we're just kind of catching up. I think this was on Friday when they came out and made this statement. Oh, hi there, Danny. I almost missed you. How are you? Hope you're well. U.S. President Donald Trump wants a deal to end Russia's war in Ukraine by August 8th. I'm sure everyone is just scrambling to make that happen. That's according to senior diplomat John Kelly, which he told the UN Security Council on the 31st. The comments come after a deadly Russian overnight attack killed. We know this was eventually ended up being 31 people in Kyiv. Wow, they didn't update this article. So this is from the Kyiv Independent, by the way, Ukrainian newspaper. Both Russia and Ukraine must negotiate a ceasefire and durable peace. It is time to make a deal, Kelly said, addressing the council. President Trump has made clear this must be done by August 8th. The United States is prepared to implement additional measures to secure peace. Okay, Trump warned on July 29th that tariffs on Russia would take effect within, 10 days unless the Kremlin agreed to halt its full-scale invasion. The proposed tariffs include sweeping secondary sanctions on countries that continue to buy Russian oil, gas, and other exports, a move that would directly impact major trading partners such as China and India. All right. Now, as just an average American citizen, when you read this paragraph, what you got to take from this is the cost of some goods might be going up. The proposed tariffs include sweeping secondary sanctions on countries besides Russia that continue to buy their goods. So that would directly impact major trading partners like China and India. Now, we know tariffs, just like taxes, those costs get pushed down to the consumer inevitably. You know, companies aren't going to take less of a profit because my camera's all messed up. 1 second. All right, there we go. Let me see if I can fix this real quick. Maybe not. It likes to zoom in sometimes with the right. Oh, now it's just. What is this thing doing? Oh, man. Anyways. All right. I'm just going to take the camera off since it doesn't want to work properly. He was no longer willing to wait. So that's what Trump most recently said. There's no reason in waiting. He said 50 days. I wanted to be generous, but now we don't see any progress is being made. Following Trump's remarks on the 29th, U.S. State Department spokesman Tammy Bruce said during a press briefing that his patience had run out. He has been patient, and that may have been misinterpreted by some people. Russia's pushed back against this ultimatum. Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chair of the Russian Security Council, accused Trump of driving the U.S. and Russia closer to conflict. There you have it. Yeah, you got it, Logan. You got it. It's a shorts and tie kind of day. All right. Kremlin plays down Trump's submarine order. So over the weekend, Medvedev, a former Russian president, and Trump were having a heated Twitter exchange. That's how we handle problems in the world now. We post on Twitter about them. So we'll read a short summary of this Reuters article. Kremlin said U.S. submarines were on combat duty already. This is probably true. No desire to engage in nuclear controversy with Trump. Trump's deadline expires on Friday. Envoy Witkoff expected in Russia this week. Moscow. All right. Russia said on Monday that everyone should be very, very careful about nuclear rhetoric, responding to a statement by U.S. President Donald Trump that he has ordered a repositioning of U.S. nuclear submarines. In its first public reaction to Trump's comments, the Kremlin played down their significance and said it was not looking to get into public argument. So that's coming from the Kremlin, a.k.a. the Russian government. Now, I want to read up just a little bit here an article on Medvedev, the guy who Trump was tweeting back and forth with. Tweeting, I think it was on Truth Social, maybe. I don't have that platform. I just have X. Despised by the Kremlin. 5 things you might not know about Dmitry Medvedev. Again, he was the president. If I remember right, Putin has been the president of Russia twice. Let's see. Russian presidents list. Let's check real quick. So first you have Boris Yeltsin. Then you have Putin from 2000 to 2008. Then you have Dmitry Medvedev from 2008 to 2012. And now we have Putin back in power. And someone like somebody else I know of who left office and then came back. Anyways, despised by the Kremlin. Let's see here. An international war of words erupted on July 30th when the United States President Donald Trump squared up on social media to former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. Now, I don't know about you guys, but nothing says power like fighting against foreign leaders who no longer have power, who were no longer elected to be there. Yeah, we're not the targeted economy. Totally correct, MG. But inevitably, the cost of the goods would increase. So while we're not the target, we would inevitably be hit by it, presumably. I want to see, let's see, reset. Can I? No, can't do that. That didn't work. I would love to fix this. I'm going to have to figure out how to fix these things. Let me see. Is it still like that if I go to another? Yeah, it is, isn't it? Okay. How do I zoom out with the camera? Ooh. I think I just found it. Okay, cool. That's a lot of clicks I got to make to do that. That's all right. That's all right. We'll fix it. Now we know. Okay, it's that tiny little button right over there. Got it. I'm using a new OBS that I use differently from my other streams, so there's still a little bit of learning going on here. All right. Anyways, so tell Medvedev, this is a quote from Mr. Trump, the failed former president of Russia, who thinks he's still president, to watch his words, says Trump. He's entering very dangerous territory. This particular spat was sparked by Medvedev's July 28th statement that Trump's ultimatum game with Moscow amounts to a threat to Russia, further escalating tensions between the two countries as the White House loses patience with the Kremlin over its refusal to end its war in Ukraine. Each new ultimatum is a threat and a step towards war, said Medvedev, currently deputy chair of Russia's Security Council. Not between Russia and Ukraine, but with his own country. Medvedev is known for his aggressive, apocalyptic rhetoric and frequent threats of nuclear escalation, gaining a reputation in the West as a man who never misses an opportunity to gain some attention. Wow. I know a guy just like that. Tell Medvedev, the failed former president of Russia who thinks he's still president, to watch his words. That's from President Trump a few days ago. Having Medvedev play the bad cop in Russia's dealings with international adversaries has the advantage of getting those statements expressed by a senior official without Putin having to do it himself, giving Putin the room to play down or backtrack from Medvedev's comments or reiterate them if he chooses. Jenny Mathers, a Russian political expert and lecturer at the at a UK university, told the Kyiv Independent. Interesting. Yeah, China and India are extremely connected to the United States economy. If you look at the tag to the clothes you're wearing right now, it most likely says it was made in China or India, maybe Pakistan, maybe another country out in that way, but it could be Malaysia, India, but Indonesia rather. But more times than not, it's going to be China or India. All right. But he hasn't always been like this. Here are 5 things you might not know about Medvedev. He spent decades in Putin's shadow. We're not going to go too deep into this. Really, the point of this is to kind of paint a picture of who the president of the United States is arguing with. One, he spent decades in Putin's shadow. So he studied at Leningrad State University, came into contact with Putin in 90 when they were both hired to work for the mayor of St. Petersburg. So these 2 guys have known each other for 35 plus years. Medvedev worked as a consultant in a department headed by Putin, setting the stage for the power dynamic that would define them for decades. Okay, so this goes back a long time. When Putin became the acting president, Medvedev was appointed deputy head of presidential staff and served under Putin as his campaign manager. Interesting. For the next 25 years, he would undertake various roles given to him by Putin. He wasn't always so vitriolic. The Medvedev of previous decades was very different. Let's see. When Putin reached the 2-term limit back in 2008, it was Medvedev who took his place, approaching the role as a modernizer and reformer. See, and I thought for some time they had a reformer in Russia. So this is the guy who was formerly known to be a modernizer and reformer of Russia, someone who was going to take them out of the darkness of the USSR, which Putin kind of seems to be more doing an about face going back towards the days of the USSR. So originally we thought Medvedev here, who is this? Italian Prime Minister Berlusconi. Okay. So this is back in 2009. You got Obama, you got Medvedev, and then you got the Italian Prime Minister. So there was, some moments of hope, I guess, for Russia. Western nations briefly saw him as a liberal reformer that they could get along with. Things have changed. All right. Though the 2008 Russo-Georgian War spiked U.S.-Russian tensions, there were positive developments during his tenure, most notably the historic New START nuclear arms treaty, which he signed with then President Obama. Yeah, I'll add you on Discord, Mr. Bot. But it was not the last. Temporarily relegated to the role of prime minister, Putin was still pulling many of the strings in the Kremlin, and he was back in the president's street in 2012. Well, there you go. He's reportedly made a lot of money from the war in Ukraine. So he probably works for, presumably some of these contractors, defense contractors. Let's see. June investigation discovered the foundations linked to Medvedev had amassed more than $850 million since the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The investigation claims much of the money was spent on military equipment, including drones, night vision goggles, generators, and medical equipment. Well, there you have it. So he's doing his role. He has his reasons for his reinvention. All right. In his new role as deputy chairman of the Security Council, observers say there's an obvious reason for his transformation to becoming the harbinger of apocalyptic doom, and that is to stay relevant. Well, there you have it. If you talk about dropping nukes, while Russia is in a large-scale war with Ukraine and much of the West, well, guess what? People are going to start listening to you. He was a meme. And just so it's not all doom and apocalyptic gloom, Medvedev has occasionally made headlines for something other than his social media outbursts, most notably his very, very awkward dancing. All right, here we go. Presumably this is him right there. Yeah, I mean, in today's news, politicians can't dance. China just sold off a significant portion of its U.S. Treasury securities. It would have a devastating effect on the U.S. dollar. Yeah, it would crash it probably. The Chinese hold a significant portion of the United States debt. They kind of got us by the balls, so to speak, in that facet. All right. Well, that's all we have for Ukraine for now. So, obviously, ongoing situation, much like Gaza. We'll keep seeing what happens here out of Ukraine. The 8th of August is this Friday, though. So, presumably, maybe on our Friday broadcast, we have a picture of what's going to happen next here between the United States, Russia, and anyone buying their oil. I know India's been buying a lot of their oil. I want to say India is about the closest U.S. ally that's been relentlessly purchasing Russian oil. A lot of the Ukraine or the European nations have greatly reduced their purchases. But we've got 3 more countries to talk about here: Lebanon, Syria, and Sudan. We'll get through these fairly quickly. In Lebanon, the end of last week, Israel back in the news, strikes on Lebanon. So we're going to follow this for just a second. I will be back in just a second. Give me one moment here. All right. That was too short of a video for a bathroom break. Anyways, all right, here we are in Lebanon. So we're going to go ahead and drop this down. City in Lebanon. And this, of course, had Israeli missile strikes against Hezbollah. We're going to learn a little bit about Hezbollah here soon as well. Another Iranian-backed terrorist organization that starts with the letter H. There are many of them. Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. All right, all radical Shias. So back to this link. All right. You weren't hearing video sound? Let's see. Headphones, let me. Oh, yeah, that's not coming through. I've got my device output on the wrong thing here. There we go. All you missed was someone talking in Arabic. You wouldn't have understood the volume and the sound anyways. But thank you, Logan, for pointing that out. I was trying to use my earbuds, but for some reason my Bluetooth is not functioning properly here. Oh, whoops. So I had to use my my gaming headset here. That's why we look so locked in today. My tie and my basketball shorts here. All right. So we got 1 person killed, 11 injured. Israel's Air Force carried out intense airstrikes on mountains overlooking a southern city in Lebanon on Friday in an attack that Israeli military said targeted underground assets of the Hezbollah militant group. So you've got Hezbollah militants living underground in mountains outside of cities in Lebanon. Shortly afterwards, an apartment building in the city of Nabatea was struck, killing a woman, wounding 11, and knocking out the building's top floor, according to Lebanon's state news agency. The state-run national news agency reported that the woman killed lived in Germany and had come back to Lebanon less than a month earlier to visit her family. It wasn't immediately clear if she was a German citizen. The woman's apartment was hit by an Israeli drone strike, according to the report. Well, if she's a German citizen, I can only imagine the German government's not going to be too happy about that. The Israeli army, in a statement posted on X, denied targeting a civilian building. The statement said the building was hit by a Hezbollah rocket that had been stored at another location that was targeted by an airstrike and launched and exploded as a result. So the Israelis are saying it was a secondary explosion. And it blames Hezbollah for storing weapons near residential areas. It's a recurring story. And I'm sure it's true oftentimes, but other times, you don't know. When the same story is used over, the same reasons are used over and over, But it also, these groups have been known to use civilian areas for weapons storage and stuff like that. Since the 14-month Israel-Hezbollah war ended and the U.S. brokered ceasefire in November, Israel has carried out almost daily airstrikes on southern Lebanon. So Israel and Hezbollah, the war ended, and yet Israel's been carrying out a lot of strikes regardless. So Friday's strikes were more intense than usual. Okay. We are steadfast no matter how much you bomb us with your fighter jets and drones, Hassan Gandour, a Shiite cleric from Nabatea, said. Lebanon's president and prime minister condemned the strikes on South Lebanon, saying they violated the ceasefire. The airstrikes on the mountains overlooking Nabatea came in 2 waves, and bunker busters were used, Lebanon's state-run national news agency reported. NNA said that 4 people were slightly wounded in the airstrikes outside the city. The Israeli military said in a statement that its fighter jets struck a site used by Hezbollah to manage its fire and defense array in the area and is part of a significant underground project that was completely taken out of use. The Israeli army said that it identified rehabilitation attempts by Hezbollah beforehand and struck infrastructure sites in the area. There was no immediate comment from Hezbollah. Hezbollah suffered significant losses on the battlefield during the war, which left more than 4,000 people dead in Lebanon and caused destruction amounting to $11 billion. In Israel, 127 people died, including 80 soldiers. As part of the ceasefire, Hezbollah was pushed away from areas bordering Israel in South Lebanon and is not allowed to have an armed presence south of the Litani River. All right. Let's just look real quick. Here's Lebanon. So where is the Litani River? Probably this river right here, I'd guess, right? No, that's the Zarani River. Let's see. There's the border, presumably. Okay, no, wait. This is the border with Israel. Yeah, okay. That's the border with Israel. Now, where is this river? Here's one river. All right, Litani River. Was that the one? Yeah, Litani River. Okay, so Hezbollah is not allowed to have anyone south of this river. So they are allowed to have people here according to the ceasefire deal. But Israel's still striking those sites regardless, even though according to the deal, they're allowed to have people up there. Interesting. So what's really going on here? It would seem like Israel agreed to a ceasefire deal that they had no intention of upholding. All right. Well, let's learn a little bit more about Hezbollah here. What is Hezbollah? The Lebanese group hit by exploding pagers. And this came out just 6 hours ago. So this is a very recent article. I keep forgetting. I can't show Reuters articles because all they do is they give you a summary unless you're a paid. Everything's behind a paywall. So this actually, this isn't going to give me what I wanted. I thought I had a different link here, though. The Lebanese government is expected to discuss Hezbollah's disarmament on Tuesday, facing pressure from the U.S. to make progress on it as Israel presses attacks on the Iran-backed group. While President Aoun and Prime Minister Salam aim to establish a state monopoly on arms, seeing this as vital to stabilizing Lebanon, Hezbollah has rejected demands for its disarmament, saying such calls serve Israel. So I think the big difference between Hezbollah and Hamas is that Hezbollah is not running the government so much in Lebanon like Hamas is running things in the Palestinian lands. But unfortunately, this did not have the information I thought it did. There's Hezbollah. Party of God is a Lebanese Shia Islamist political party and paramilitary group. Hezbollah's paramilitary wing is the Jihad Council, which and its political wing is the Loyalty to the Resistance Bloc Party in the Lebanese parliament. So they exist within the Lebanese parliament. So let's look. Lebanese parliament makeup. So let's see if we can get a breakdown how much power they actually have here. Now, this was Loyalty to the Resistance Bloc Party, Loyalty to the Resistance Bloc. So they are the yellow. Okay, so it looks like they have maybe an eighth. Okay, so there's 128 seats and they have 15. So they're a minority representation in the government. But also tied for the second largest representation. You have the Strong Republic of Lebanon. It's the paramilitary bloc of the Lebanese forces and the Lebanese parliament. Okay. So that's 19 seats. Then you've got Hezbollah with 15 seats. And then you've got the Development and Liberation Group, which is the parliamentary bloc of the Amal movement and Ba'ath Party. Okay. Now, the Ba'athists were the Saddam loyalists, if I remember correctly, who I thought were Sunni. So this would be interesting. Headed by, consists of 15 deputies. Are they Sunni? Doesn't say. Oh, wait. Here we go. Session deputies. Okay, so these are all Shias except for one. Oh, they got one guy in the Ba'ath Party who's a Sunni. Yep, there you go. I thought they were Sunnis. And then there's one Greek Catholic. Oh, boy. How interesting. So that makes up the Development and Liberation. So it seems like they're not necessarily united religiously. Okay. That's good, though. You need Shias, Sunnis, and even maybe a Christian or a Jew, in the same political group to kind of get things to chill out here, I think. Usually everything's... So Lebanon is a country where it seems like there's people trying to do the right thing, trying to get away from Hezbollah, trying to get away from Iranian radical Shia influence, even to the point where some Catholics and Sunnis are being elected. You probably won't see any Jewish people elected anytime soon. Also, I mean, how many Jewish people live in Lebanon? Probably very few, if any. How many Jews live in Lebanon? The number of Jews living in Lebanon today is very small, with estimates ranging from fewer to 100 to around 29. Yep, there you have it. And they're probably like right on the border with Israel, I'd guess, on the very south border. All right. So there's a little bit of the ongoing situation in Lebanon with Hezbollah. Hezbollah has lost a ton of power. We saw one of the articles said 4,000 of their fighters were killed earlier in the year or last year when the Israel-Lebanon war was going on. And then I think it said earlier this year, at the end of last year, is when a peace deal was brokered. However, as we saw, the Israelis are still striking north of the river where Hezbollah fighters are currently allowed to exist under the rules of the ceasefire. So it seems like Israel's not really honoring that, but also they're having further talks to try and end all of the hostilities between the two countries. It's another situation where a neighbor of Israel is more or less has been harboring terrorists who hate the state of Israel and want to see its destruction. I think Lebanon's probably sick of being bombed, which is why they're working on getting some of those Hezbollah people out. But of course, Israel killed thousands of these fighters, and they still have a presence in central and northern Lebanon. So we will see what happens with that one as well. All right, what we got next? Syria. So just a minor event in Syria here. Again, in the Sweda province, about a week or two ago, there were large massacres of Druze. Something like over 1,000 Druze were massacred. There were counter massacres from the Druze against both the Bedouin tribes who had initiated these massacres and then some of the Syrian government-backed fighters who had kind of partaken in the massacres as well. Let's see. Thought Hezbollah was the most powerful political party in Lebanon. They may have been for a while. They may have been. Let's see. We'll go back for a second. I missed that comment. Now, in Palestine, Hamas is basically running the government, running the health ministry, running everything. Of course, Palestine doesn't have a officially recognized state or government. And I think part of that is why Hamas is able to infiltrate to the extent that they have. Now, in Lebanon, of course, there's been Hezbollah in government. However, I think after this war, they've either expelled those people from government or they've been able to greatly diminish those who have been either elected or chosen to represent in that parliament, that 128, I think it was, member parliament. And now Hezbollah, they only have 15 of those 128 seats. So, barely over 10%. And that's with, 15 to 20 other parties too, all fighting for power. So they have a very diminished presence within the government, even though they still are the second largest party, tied with another party. Ewan says that Hezbollah's military is stronger. It's very, very well possible. Now, Lebanon military. Let's look for just a second. The Lebanese armed forces here. Now, this is just quick Wikipedia. Let's see. Active personnel, 170,000 is what Wikipedia is saying for the Lebanese armed forces. Let's see. How many Hezbollah fighters exist in Lebanon? We'll probably get an AI generated response. Okay, sources indicate varying figures. That's to be expected. So in 2021, Hezbollah leaders claimed that they had 100,000 fighters. But analysts suggest that's an exaggeration. Okay. Some sources, like the CIA World Fact Book, estimated in 2024 that Hezbollah had 50,000 armed combatants, but noted not all were full-time. Okay. Other analysis put the number at roughly 40 to 50,000. Got March 2004 report said 50,000, One source estimated 60,000. Okay. According to informed sources reported in July 2025, Hezbollah's number of fighters stood at around 60,000 compared to 100,000 in October 2021. So there's a lot of sources kind of saying it's around 50,000, but they're also a little outdated. So it's kind of hard to tell. But there presumably are still tens of thousands of Hezbollah fighters operating in Lebanon. Okay. Well, that is very interesting. Let's see. How many fighters does the Lebanese military have? 70,000 in the army. So yeah, it's very well possible that the UN is right with those numbers, that there are more Hezbollah fighters than there are Lebanese armed forces. Very possible. Getting conflicting numbers on both accounts. And again, the Lebanese government might not be accurately reporting or routinely reporting their troop numbers. They might also be intentionally secretive of that, for all we know. So yeah, I did not know Hezbollah was that big. When I was reading that the Israelis had killed 4,000 fighters, I was thinking to myself, well, they're probably not going to be much of a problem now, but here we are. It seems like that will continue to be a problem for Israel. All right, so back to Syria here. Of course, I was saying we had those massacres and counter massacres. Now, with the counter massacres done by the Druze, we don't quite know any details as to what the Druze did in response to the massacres that they suffered. So they could have, what that looks like, it could have looked like executions. It could have been torture. They could have just went and destroyed some homes. We don't really know what the Druze did in response. There weren't a lot of reports that I could find about it. Not really any, to be honest. But since those events, of course, after that, there were peace talks. The Syrian government seems pretty committed, or at least they say they're pretty committed to protecting the Druze and really to protecting all religious and ethnic minorities within Syria, which Syria is a very diverse nation. And you can tell that would be true too due to its location. So this is Syria. It's going to pop up at some point and say Syria. There we go. So with Syria, obviously you have Israel shares a border. Then you have all these more Muslim-leaning countries. You got Turkey up north. You got Lebanon right here to the west. You got Iraq to the east. You got Jordan to the south. So Syria is kind of in the middle of all of this, more or less. So you can it's easy to expect that they would have a diverse population. Plus then they do, of course, have some border with the Mediterranean Sea as well. So of course, when you have water borders like this, it does allow, sometimes for people to come in and whatnot from refugees, maybe from Greece 20 years ago. Although I don't think they were going to Syria. It was potentially a possibility, but I doubt anyone was fleeing Greece during their economic woes for Syria. It would have been a very bad choice, of course, in hindsight. But anyways, on with this article. Armed groups attacked personnel from Syria's internal security forces. So these are Syrian security forces, Syrian government forces who have been tasked with keeping the peace in Sueda. Again, that's a Druze majority city, although the Druze are a minority in Syria. I think they make up like 10%. Syrian ethnic groups. The Druze make up, I think. Oh, it doesn't say ethnic groups. Here we go. Ethnic groups in Syria. I need a breakdown, damn it. Syrian ethnic groups breakdown. All right, so the Druze. Okay, the Druze are actually only 3%. My bad. I think maybe it was 10% in Israel. Is what I was looking at. And again, the Druze are spread out. There's Druze in Lebanon, Syria, Israel, Jordan. They're kind of native to this area. So, and they've been there for a long time. This is an offshoot of, I believe, Shia Islam, if I remember correctly. So armed groups attacked those government forces, killing one member and wounding others, and fired shells at several villages in the violence hit southern province, the state-run TV reported on Sunday. The report cited a security source saying that armed groups had violated the ceasefire agreed in predominantly Druze region, where factional bloodshed killed hundreds of people last month. So let's go ahead and drop this. We will go back to Sweden, Syria. Drop ourselves. This one will be orange for more minor conflicts. Attack on Syrian security personnel. Make that large. All right. So I should probably drop one on Gaza too. Not that anybody has forgotten that we have an ongoing situation there, but you know. Let's see, Gaza, images of children, followed by hostages released, worldwide condemnation. All right, done with that one. Very good. We got Ukraine. We got that. We got Lebanon. Okay, we got everyone so far on Google Earth. All right, and that's all for Syria for now. Finally, we're going to get to Sudan. First time talking about Sudan on stream. So there has been a 3-year-long civil war going on in Sudan. Let's get this opened up real quick here. All right, hunger mounts, cemeteries grow, and Sudan's besieged, all for sure. All right. And again, this is another mini article from Reuters. I got to stop. We'll subscribe to them eventually here. Hundreds of thousands of people under siege in the Sudanese army's last holdout in the western Darfur region. Now, if you know anything at all about Africa and Sudan, you have definitely heard of the Darfur region. There's been a lot of war, a lot of famine. It's one of the worst hit regions in the world over the last 20, 30, 40 years. Running out of food, coming under constant artillery and drone barrages, while those who flee risk cholera and violent attacks on their way out. Well, for sure, the capital of North Darfur State is the biggest remaining front line in the region between Sudan's army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, under fire at a pivotal point in the civil war, which is now well into its 3rd year. All right, here's the video. This is from Sky News. I believe it's an Australian publication. Now, I had trouble finding much on this from the AP or the BBC or Reuters. This has not been a very well covered conflict at all. So we should definitely bring some awareness to it because it's been going on for 3 years. And basically now a final city has been encircled in this civil war where these radical forces are trying to basically defeat the Sudanese government. Of course, if you remember, here we go, newest country in the world is South Sudan. And that happened in 2011. South Sudan was established and recognized by the world. And that, of course, was a result of the civil war in Sudan, and then, you're looking 10-ish years later, another civil war is happening in this same region of the world. So let's real quick, I want to mark this. Al-Fashir, Sudan. Now, this is a major conflict, so it does get a dark red. And this is, tens of thousands of people have been killed, probably even more than that, in this conflict that has received very little attention from the rest of the world. So, oops. There we go. Sudan has oil. Surprised we haven't stepped in. It's a good point, Logan. It makes you wonder, maybe these wars aren't just about oil. Perhaps there are other things as well. What those other things are for us to decide, I guess. So, final besieged city by, what was it, the RSF, I think was their abbreviation. That is the Rapid Support Forces, yes. By, let's see, by RSF, I'm going to put this Rapid Support Forces. It sounds like such a nice name, All right. All right, so we got our marker down in Sudan. So South Sudan and Sudan. So this is happening in actual Sudan. South Sudan is the country that kind of broke off and established its own independence. Now, my understanding of this, and this could be completely wrong, but South Sudan is a predominantly Christian country, and Northern Sudan is a predominantly Muslim country, I believe. Well, let's look that up real quick. South Sudan religion is a religiously diverse, with Christianity being predominant. About 60% is Christian. Significant portion following traditional African religions. Interesting. So that's a third. Islam, only 6%. Now let's look up Sudan. Islam is the dominant religion in Sudan, with approximately 90% identifying as Muslim. So Christians and traditional African religion bearers of that faith were being oppressed, were experiencing genocide from the Muslim inhabitants of Sudan. And again, this was all Sudan originally. But they ended up finally breaking away. There was a civil war, and then the countries of the world then began to recognize Sudan as its own country. Or South Sudan, I'm sorry. South Sudan as its own country. And this is basically a pretty purely religious conflict that's been going on for a long time here. I'm sure there's other ethnic and cultural things that come up, but predominantly it's been a religious thing. Now, what's happening with the RSF? Who is the RSF? That is what we need to know. The RSF in Sudan, officially the Rapid Support Forces, is a paramilitary group with roots in the Janjaweed militias used during the Darfur conflict. It was originally formed in 2013 and has been involved in various conflicts and security operations within Sudan. The RSF is led by General known as Hemedti. Okay, that doesn't tell us a whole lot. Formed in 2013, the RSF was originally intended to combat rebel groups in Darfur. Okay, has been involved in conflicts against various rebel groups and has also been used to repress popular uprisings. All right, the RSF has amassed wealth through controlling gold mines in Darfur and providing mercenaries. Okay. Currently engaged in a power struggle with the Sudanese army, which has escalated into a civil war. The RSF has faced numerous accusations of human rights abuses, including attacks on civilians, looting, and rape, particularly in Darfur. Parallel government. More recently, the RSF has declared a parallel government in areas under its control, further complicating the political landscape in Sudan. All right, so you have a lot of stuff going on here in Sudan. Basically, they lost this portion of their country due to all the religious conflict. Shortly after that, this RSF established themselves. They've been operating in this Darfur region, which I assume is this area. Do we have a... If we zoom in, does it tell us? All right, let's look. Let's just type in Darfur. Hopefully I'm pronouncing this correctly. Okay, yeah. So it is this whole area. So this is kind of a area where lots of bad things have been happening for a long time. All right. So we got that. And then we've got a quick video here from Sky News in Australia.
This is a suffocated city, cut off from food and fuel for over a year. The volunteers keeping people alive are on the back of this cart. You'll die of hunger, he says, and no one will even care. This rare footage from inside Al-Fashir is a picture of paralysis. The city's been relentlessly targeted by the RSF, who tightened their siege after Sudan's army reclaimed the capital. The entire city is now a militarized zone, and no filming is allowed. Thousands are squeezed into these tents on the edges of Al-Fashir. The famine declared in displacement sites, attacked and ransacked by the RSF, may have spread to these rare safe zones where aid can't reach, and families are forced to eat animal feed to stay alive.
We are suffering so much from no food, no water. We are hungry. Our children are naked. We have nothing to eat but animal feed. There is no water. We have nothing.
Volunteers are doing what they can to stave off starvation, offering one small dish of starch to take the edge off. Humanitarian aid convoys have made it into North Darfur but can't come anywhere near the city without facing fire from RSF militiamen upholding their brutal siege.
To highlight how impossible it is to bring aid, to bring food to El Fasher. There was another convoy, UN convoy, with 15 trucks that tried to reach El Fasher at the very beginning of June. It could not, and there were five aid workers that were killed at this moment, and since then no more convoy has been able to reach El Fasher. In April we received several men injured with gunshots in MSF supported hospital in Tawila, and they were injured by rapid support forces and their allies because they were trying to bring food to Zamzam at the time.
I speak to Mohammed Ad-Doma, an emergency response volunteer who recently fled Al-Fashir siege with his family. He tells me they had to walk for 4 hours just to make it out.
I'm so sad to see my people suffer and not be able to offer them help because of no support or supplies. That's what pushed me to leave. All signs point to there being a first-degree famine in Al-Fashir.
These scenes confirm the brutal reality. Al-Fashir is most vulnerable, facing forced starvation from a harrowing siege. With nowhere to turn but God for relief. Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky News.
Yeah, very, very sad. You know, Sudan's been a country that's just been suffering immensely. Civil war. So they're talking about this, but what about the first Sudan Civil War? First. Oh, so there's been more than one, more than two, very many Sudan Civil War. Let's Sudan Civil Wars timelines. See if we can see all the wars. All right. The first Sudanese civil war is from 55 to 72. The second was from 83 to 2005. And now they're in another civil war, 2023 till now. So, man, talk about just worst draw of luck you could possibly get. to be born in Sudan during any of those times, because whether it was this war, or the current one, there has not been much international outcry or international support. Even we just watched that video, and you hear aid workers are being killed trying to deliver aid into that city, and yet there's no international outrage. At least it's not a top news headline. You know, in Israel, the Hamas just released videos of couple of the hostages, and there was widespread outrage from the West. Even with this just being a week after the all the videos and images of the Palestinian children who are starving, and all of those videos, had extensive outrage, unanimously, as they should have. But then you just don't hear about Sudan. It's real sad. But yeah, we'll bring just a little bit of awareness to Sudan here. But this is another thing I'm going to keep paying attention to, all for sure, and what happens in that city. They said that's the last city, the last holdout in that civil war. So hopefully that situation ends soon, one way or the other, because just seeing a bunch of children sitting around on the ground, nowhere to go, nothing to do. There's obviously stuff like this is going to impact their development, their lives, and certainly some of them have lost their parents or other family members in this conflict. So, very sad and very similar situation to Gaza, really, what's going on here in this one city, for sure. Aid can't seem to come in. The city's besieged. The city's destroyed. People are starving. There's famine, and very little, if any, hope at all. So very, very similar situation. But that will be all for today. No mention about U.S. aid cuts affected this. Yeah. No, that's a good question, Logan. They said, I think, that those aid trucks were trying to get into Sudan back in June. So it was about 2 months ago, which would have been after the whatever U.S. aid was going to Sudan stopped. Let's see, former U.S. aid to Sudan. Let's see what we used to give. The United States has a long history. The United States has a long history of providing foreign aid to Sudan, particularly in response to humanitarian crises like famine and conflict. Historically, the U.S. was a major donor, notably during Operation Lifeline Sudan in '89 and for drought relief in '91. However, aid has been impacted by political factors, including Sudan's failure to repay loans in '85 and shifts in aid policies. More recently, U.S. aid has provided significant assistance, reaching millions with food, water, and health. So let's see. Because what we want to see is what is the current... The U.S., let's see, recent developments, increased funding. The U.S. has announced additional humanitarian assistance to Sudan totaling $424 million. So when is this? Oh, this was at the end of last year. This was September last year. So this is probably long evaporated. So what is the current U.S. aid? Current U.S. aid to Sudan. Foreign assistance by country. Okay. This is fa.gov, so this should be accurate. So regional rank, Sudan is 11th with 570 million. Interesting. Okay. Now, this is all aid, not just what's coming from the United States. Okay. So they got World Food Program, 240 million, non-governmental organizations from the United States, 50 million, church and faith-based organizations from the United States, 47 million. Geez, I mean, most of this is actually coming from the United States, just not the United States government. It's coming from non-governmental organizations, NGOs. Then you got United Nations Children's Fund, 27 million, UN Development Program, 27 million, non-governmental organization, International Redacted, so we don't know, UN Population Fund, 17 million. So they're getting a variety of aid from a variety of places. Now, what they're getting from the United States government is hard to figure out. Let's see. Funding agency. Department of Agriculture, $104 million. Okay, so here's the different U.S. So they're still getting some stuff from the U.S. government, it seems. But it's probably a lot less than it used to be. And yeah, so this is saying about $500 million from all agencies combined. And by year, you can see 22, they got almost 900 million, 570 in 2023, 800 million in 24. You can see it's dropped significantly in 2025. There's probably a combination of reasons. One, it seems like the civil war is down to one city now. Two, the rising, the escalating situations in Gaza and in Ukraine are probably taking some money out of pockets of Sudan right now. It's really sad for Sudan that there's other major things going on in the world because, I mean, from this, you see this massive drop. I mean, they're kind of getting left behind here. Unless this is just saying what they've received so far in 2025, Okay, here you go. Exclamation, partially reported years, 24 and 25. So this number in 24 isn't even a full report, according to this. Okay, so, but we're into the 8th month of 2025, and this is all that's been reported so far. So still probably experiencing a dip here, Ooh, let's see. We got a link here from Mr. Logan. Let's see if I can check this. All right, here we go. Sudan has become a case study. All right, very good, Logan. Thank you. I do not find everything. So this is less than a month old. All right. This is very relevant. Sudan has become a case study. Let me add this real quick before I forget. I'm going to add this to our links for things that we're discussing on Sudan. Paste that. Now, usually when I go to insert a link, Google's so smart now that usually it finds the link right off the rip. Airdrops. All right. Well, it didn't do it this time. It didn't do it right this time, but that's okay. All right. Let's read this article real quick, and then we'll wrap up for today. Sudan has become a case study for the impact of U.S. aid cuts, says one aid worker. Funding gaps amid the civil war leave 60% of the population in need. So about 2/3 of people. Here, let's watch this video real quick. UN World Food Program has conducted humanitarian airdrops in South Sudan. Okay, so this is South Sudan. And just quick background, I don't think South Sudan has ever really gotten their government or their economy on their feet. Remember, this is the youngest country in the world. 2011 they were established. And I've watched some things talking about they still don't have like roads in South Sudan. Just these basic things that you need for a country to function, they still don't have. So presumably, we are giving them a lot of aid still, South Sudan. think and hope. Just airdropping whatever. Jeez, don't get hit by one of those. Organization said in a news release it was the first time in more than 4 months it was able to deliver food to the 40,000 people there. Wow. WFP airdrops totaling 700 metric tons follows the Upper Nile by a private American group working with humanitarian distributors. Okay, they come as the U.S. initiates a new era of foreign assistance under the auspices of the State Department. So this is, they're talking about how the State Department's changed a lot of funding with the cuts that came with the new Trump administration and Doge and all that stuff that happened. Foreign aid was kind of the top of the chopping block. So this is some of the effects that those cuts have had here. Comes, I just read that. Now defunct, the U.S. aid officially closed its door on July 1st when the State Department took over the remaining programs. So U.S. aid no longer exists. Now it's all run by a State Department. Personnel was downsized by 83%, and a small number were rehired to continue their work under the new apparatus. A senior State Department official said a new deft bureaucracy accountable to Washington policymakers could have more of an appetite for unconventional measures like airdrops. So basically what that just said is they're going to probably transition to things that are a little bit easier for the aid people to do, which is to just drop things out of an airplane instead of actually deliver them on trucks. The humanitarian community has long wrestled over airdrops, which are costly and difficult to execute. They are considered a last resort for conflict zones unreachable by land and sea, of course, because anything you airdrop in can be taken. State Department spokesperson told ABC it was aware of reports of airdrops in South Sudan, but that the U.S. has not been involved in those operations. It said it's not working with 4Aug military operations. South Sudan WFP said it can deliver crucial assistance, 1,500 metric tons of food, if the country's main river routes were reopened and the active fighting subsides. Now, presumably, those rivers are going to be running through Sudan as well, I would reckon. So that was talking about South Sudan, but these countries, their problems are very one and much the same. So with a lot of that South Sudan aid being cut, you could easily assume that aid to Sudan as well is being cut. So, all right. Well, oops, that's the wrong one. That is all for today, folks. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, man. I appreciate you guys. I will be back tomorrow with hopefully some positive updates on some of these things. But we will keep covering all this. Do what we can to bring awareness to some of these lesser known conflicts. And then, of course, stay up to date on things like Gaza and Ukraine, which have been going on for years now, and kind of have the, front and center attention of much of the world. But thank you, everyone. I really appreciate everyone for hanging out and the comments, all that. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. I will see you soon.